subdivision of this property or split of the property, because it's not technically a subdivision per a plat, was in violation of the city zoning ordinance. It doesn't appear to be. David Keeney, the county recorder, was not in his office today because there are ways to prevent the splitting of property within city limits, and the city does have, in fact, a zoning ordinance to that effect, but it only applies to properties that are under 2.5 acres and meet a few other conditions. Or should I say there are some exceptions to that allowance of a split of the property if it's in excess of 2.5 acres, if there's a certain number of public road frontage in the parcel that's split, and it appears that the property that was sold was in compliance with that, and so that all that was required was a survey. And it appears that the county did require that survey be provided before splitting the parcel. What I needed to speak to Mr. Keeney about is confirming that the city has done everything that it needs so that the county will not split a parcel if it doesn't meet the city's zoning requirements. There are some recording requirements for the city zoning, and there are some notice requirements so that the county doesn't basically overstep its bounds and allow someone to do something in violation of the city's zoning ordinance. So I need to get together with Mr. Keeney to ensure that the city's in compliance with everything we need to do so that they don't then allow someone to do something in violation of our city's zoning ordinance. That will occur, but it appears that did not occur in this case. And with these problems with water infiltration, the unnatural or changing the natural flow of the water in that area, if that's something that the city desires to have an impact on in the future, it may require a zoning amendment in order to prevent this kind of thing from happening without a proper drainage plan being in place, as was probably Mr. Sexauer's intent, because he probably wanted to divide this into lots smaller than 2.5 acres. And so that drainage plan would have been necessary for the plat to be approved. So if we want to look at increasing the parcel size to require a plat, that's something that will require a zoning ordinance amendment. So I guess I was just kind of here to report on that. There are a couple of other things that we've been looking at and working on. Something that I have not delved into, other than to say, is this potentially an issue, is the ADA compliance issues with the library. And I think that was actually a news story that got me looking at whether or not that's going to be an issue. We, in receiving the letter from the city of Rushford Village, I understand you're going to be getting together with them now. Wendy, I think, kind of indicated that we had taken a look at the Comanche Road issue. We need to speak with Otomo Engineering to just confirm. I think their findings were consistent with what we found, and that there doesn't appear to be platted roadway there or easement for a roadway there, other than the 16-foot that's currently noted, I think, in the engineering plans. So I'll give you a little update there. I didn't review all of my files. One of the things that you'll note in your packets was the police department report. This is something that I have not addressed with Chief Stensgaard, but you'll note that in 2009 there was approximately $2,700 received for administrative citations. The state changed the laws with regard to administrative citations, and you'll see that there's nothing budgeted for administrative citations this year. It is still a better deal than taking things to the district court and getting money back from the state on citations. If we were to put together a new administrative citation plan, I don't know if that's something that the police department is willing to do. It does require administrative hearing officers, and there's some things that we could do with some other cities in Fillmore County to potentially put together a panel of hearing officers if we were to reinstitute administrative citations as opposed to general district court citations. So that's again kind of an informational thing, something to think about, and I would obviously want to make sure that the police department is still interested in that. Obviously the profit margin, as it were, is much less now that the state has taken to legislatively controlling how we do our administrative citations. More has to be sent into the state for return to the general fund than was previously required, and so it may not be something that's feasible, but that's something to think about for the future, whether or not we do want to put together a program for administrative citations.
They were also requiring a certain style of ticket,
Yes.
which required us to print up a whole bunch of different tickets than what we already had, so
Yeah.
it would have been an added expense.
An added expense, and I think that expense is minimal compared to the cost of having
Sending the money into the state.
the money that gets sent into the state, as well as the cost of having hearing officers available. The Office of Administrative Hearings through the state of Minnesota does provide those services for several municipalities in the metropolitan area, but I would venture to say they're going to be issuing a lot more administrative citations than the city of Rushford is. And these are only with relation to petty misdemeanor moving violations or non-moving violations. But petty misdemeanor offenses, things that are not technically a crime. You had a question, Mr. Robertson, on Mr. Suri?
Yep.
Okay.
I don't understand why these judgments haven't been paid. I mean, once the judge grants the judgment, where does the negotiation come in?
Well, judgments need to be enforced, and they need to be enforced through collection mechanisms that are available. And I think you're fully aware of ways to garnish or levy and things to that effect. It may very well be that, well, and I understand that after the judgment has been granted, oftentimes, we, on behalf of our clients, will negotiate to get payments so that we're not going through the additional time and expense of getting the writs of execution, potentially levying on property that's no longer there, and the cost of that. It's better to get them paid. And I understand that Mr. Suri has done that on a number of his, and then on a number of others, there has either been no attempts to execute and levy on the judgment or enforce the judgment, and they may be continuing to negotiate on things to that effect. Whether the judgment creditor chooses to I guess give some effect to their judgment is really up to the individual creditors.
Well, it bothers me that we're dealing with an individual here that has judgments outstanding against him that have not been paid. That bothers me. And it is, excuse me, it especially bothers me because we're relying on him to put in a fair amount of money into this community center here without a performance bond. Do you know why we don't have a performance bond?
That was something that was not negotiated with him. The payment and performance bond was not negotiated with him. I think there were probably a number of reasons. First, when you look at the statute for payment and performance bonds, you've got to look at whether it's public works. And then the